Want to welcome everyone and officially kick off the February 26, 2014 meeting of the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board Financial Aid Advisory Committee. Again, welcome. A little bit disjointed this morning. We're going to blame it on the weather. Everybody's kind of dragging in a little bit, and that's okay. We're glad to have everyone here. Just for the record, I'd like to go around the room, start with Lynn. Say who you are, who you're with, and we'll try to as well pick up those of you in the audience. It just kind of helps us know who's here. If we have questions, we know who we can point to. So if you will, please.
My name is Lynn Kenyon. I'm our education coordinator. Anna Martinez, University of Texas at San Antonio.
And you are here for?
The Blazer.
Alan Ahmed. I'm with Alamo Community Colleges. I'm in for Harold Whitus.
And Zelma De Leon, University of North Texas.
Millette Leaf Green, Texas Christian University.
Marcus Wilson, Texas Tech University Health Sciences Center.
Jane Caldwell, Texas.
And I'm sorry, as we go around the room, make sure you turn your microphone on. Now interrupted Jane.
Jane Caldwell, Director of Grants and Special Programs, Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board.
Terry Bazan, Austin Community College.
Carolyn Jones, Collin County Community College.
George Torres, Texas Guaranteed Student Loan Corporation.
Pilar Janis, Lead Higher Ed Counselor, K through 12, Brownsville Independent School District.
Joe Pettibon, Texas A&M University.
You hesitated. Dan Weaver with the Coordinating Board.
Rufus Coburn, Director of Veterans Education, Texas Veterans Commission.
Fantastic. Again, welcome everyone. Did everybody get introduced? Okay. Glad everyone's here. Welcome the exchange of comments, ideas. That's what this is all about. I'm sure everyone's had a chance to read through the minutes that were provided to you earlier. Are there any corrections or updates that we need to make to that? Hearing none, we have approved the minutes. Oh, okay. Does everybody like the format of the minutes? Just kind of the layout, the way that they're done and provided to us? My comment to Jane was I really like it as long as I don't have to do them. So kind of whatever format they're provided to us, it's home run for me. But then that's my opinion. Everyone else, preference one way or the other? Okay. And Lisa, you are the one who's doing this, correct? So thank you very much.
If I may make a comment about this, Lisa graciously volunteered to do the minutes for these meetings. And she went to the effort of the transcription of the full text of our discussion last time, mainly to make sure we had a very clear reflection of what Dr. Davis had spoken to us about with regard to competency-based education. That is an exceptionally time-consuming process, and if the group is comfortable with a less rigorous reflection of every word that is said by this group, it would probably be much easier for Lisa, and you might get the results more quickly if we don't go to this same rather extraordinary approach. I'm speaking for Lisa. I think she's willing to do them any way this group would prefer them, but if a simpler approach would work for you, it would be much easier for us to provide it.
Thoughts, comments, opinions, motion?
Well, I think one suggestion would be like the way the headers are in the different sections is awesome. But instead of having all the paragraphs, just having bullets, just sort of summarizing what it is. And if there's action items, then that can be something that's notated that somebody's going to do. Like there's somebody that's going to follow up on something so that they don't have to be so lengthy. Just a suggestion.
Valid. I think that probably would work well. And I believe you do have a permanent job with this. I don't see anyone fighting to take this away from you. Okay, let's run with that. I think that's a great idea. Our first presenter this morning will be dealing with kind of the handoff, the transition of Hazelwood to the Texas Veterans Commission. Rufus Coburn and Muriel Miller are here representing that group, and hopefully it's going smoothly, but you'll tell us.
Well, so far so good. First of all, thank you for the opportunity to come and give you an update on how the transition is going. We were the bill, Senate Bill 1158, that transferred the Hazelwood administration to the Texas Veterans Commission, required that rules making be conducted or be achieved through a negotiated rulemaking process. We have just completed what I would call phase one of the negotiated rulemaking process. And that was the formation of a committee comprised of members from the major university systems, the independent colleges and universities throughout the state, interested veterans groups or veteran service organizations, and the two warring parties, which I say that kind of tongue-in-cheek. I think it was perceived that way to some degree, that there might have been some resistance on the part of the coordinating board, and there might have been more exuberance on the part of the Veterans Commission, and we all who were involved in it know that wasn't the case at all. But so after the first meeting, we found out that we had a lot in common, and the most binding thing was we all had a very big interest in making sure this thing is done right and that everyone's interests were represented and represented fairly. The meetings actually began in October 2013 and continued fairly frequently until the first part of February. The committee, I think, worked very well together. The relationships were very amicable. We achieved consensus on the draft rules. And that doesn't mean that it was all join hands and sing kumbaya. There was some very good discussions. There were a lot of points made that just we really, no one had really sat down and gone over these Hazelwood rules in the detail and the statute in the detail that the committee did. And I think the product, as you see the product, I think you'll agree that it's a pretty darn good product as a result of the committee. Now,
can I interrupt you for just
Sure.
a second? My understanding is they're having trouble with the audio video that's going out. I don't know who can address that. So, again, my apologies for interrupting. I think there's some folks at home that want to hear it as well.
You mean I have to repeat all of that?
No, sir. It's being recorded somewhere. So please continue.
So the process has gone through the actual formation of the committee. The committee has produced a draft. That draft was approved yesterday for publication in the Texas Register by the Texas Veteran Commission. So it will be in the Texas Register for public comment for a period of 30 days. At the end of that 30 days, the Commission will again meet to consider public comment, the inclusion thereof, and the next part of that process is, assuming that there's probably not going to be too much, or it's not going to make substantive changes, then the Commission will approve the rules, and the goal is to have them approved in the May time frame such that schools will be able to implement the rules for the fall 2014 term. That's what we're shooting for. And I think, as I said, the negotiated rulemaking committee just did a wonderful job of working together and hammering these things out. So we're all pretty confident that they're going to be adopted in pretty much in good shape in the form they were presented. Another part of the process is the transfer of the database, the Hazelwood database. Right now, the Veterans Commission, have two people who are taking care of the veteran issues for phone calls and information response and so forth. The coordinating board still physically has the database. We should have a server so that we can transfer a test version of the database so that our contractor can work with that and do the magic IT stuff that has to be done to effect the transfer. We should have that server on board mid-March. Depending on the complexity from the IT guy's perspective of what we're dealing with, that's going to determine the actual time it takes to effect that transfer. But hopefully we will have, again, the goal is to have all of that done so that everything will be in place. We'll be all set to go for full and complete implementation by the fall term. Probably it won't take that long, but until the IT guys get in there and check out all the electrons, I would be totally out of school if I made much more than just a guess on that. So there's when we are on the database. Forms. Everybody wants to know what's going to happen with forms. The committee did work on the forms issue, although that was extraneous to the actual rules process. We have draft forms which are currently undergoing legal review, and the idea is that we will take those forms, get TVC form numbers for identifiers assigned to them, so it will, instead of being rather an ad hoc form, it will be a formal commission form, so it can be referred to as like TVC Form 1 or whatever it happens to be. And the forms will be posted accessible. They'll be posted on the database or the website so that veterans can use them, download them, and that process is ongoing. So that's where we are. I think the committee did a real good job of. We've tried to simplify, reduce the number of forms, yet have an appropriate form for each requirement, and I think that's in pretty good shape right now. Probably we're not going to have those forms ready for distribution in time for summer term and or fall term right now. So what we're looking at is to continue the current forms until we get these forms ready to release, and then there'll be a period where either set of forms will be acceptable until we can effect a smooth transition on that. Subject to your questions, that's where we are on the transfer.
Questions, comments?
I have a question. For the summer students that are processed, because transition from the database moving from to TVC is they'll be able to log.
Right now, TVC has got that. I'm sorry, coordinating board has got that. That should continue. There will be plenty of information dissemination prior to the changeover. We're not going to do bang, hammer fall in the middle of the night, and then there's a changeover. We will keep everybody appraised of what we're doing. Right now, that database issue is still an unknown. We're getting the hardware in place to do it, but until we get the IT guys involved, we really don't know what we're dealing with.
I think we will just continue as is with reports, with handling things that, as Rufus has indicated, but we're going to be very careful to make sure no one gets dropped in the middle. So we will continue to do the queries about the hours and so forth as needed until TVC is ready to take that on.
Some comments, thoughts that came from the student member of our committee. She's unable to be here, but I'm going to kind of throw some of her comments towards you. I believe these were all shared with members of the committee ahead of time. And her comment is, I believe that working to help finance the education of veterans is an extremely important role of the coordinating board. By assisting veterans and their families in receiving higher education, we are able to make a difference for those who are serving our country. So that's her observation. Then question to ask of the committee, how does the transition of Hazelwood to the TVC affect the families of veterans, specifically the financial aid that spouses and children receive for college? In my experience, it is very difficult for students whose family members are veterans to receive the financial aid that they are eligible for. Is this a problem with distribution, eligibility, or education about the requirements for this type of financial aid?
I think the real issue there is dissemination of information. We have just recently, and we're working that. There's not a quick magic solution to ensuring that all 1.695 million veterans in the state know about Hazelwood, or even the GI Bill for that matter. We have just recently completed our second webinar on Hazelwood, and both of them have been very well subscribed, and we're putting those on through the Texas Veteran Commission website. We are trying to breathe a little more viability into our website, and I have one person who is working that essentially full time, where that's been a part-time project heretofore. But the website is just one avenue of getting information out. We are, we publish flyers. We can't sponsor the Super Bowl. We don't have that kind of money. If we could, that's the way to get the word out. But we are trying to expand our outreach and information flow on that. I think we have, all the school conferences and all that we go to. We mention Hazelwood. I think there's a wider knowledge base of the program now than there was perhaps a couple of years ago, and there are a lot of reasons for that. But I do think the publicity effort is expanding. It is by no means perfect. And as with many other things, it is, if we had the funds to sponsor the Super Bowl, then we could guarantee that there'd be a lot more people that were aware of it. But we still in our office get about 12,000 phone calls a year, and most of those have a Hazelwood element to it. Even if the veteran calls about GI Bill, they want to know, well, what about so and so? So I think we're doing better on that. We've still got a long way to go.
and I'm going to throw out my 2 cents there. I think the things that you're dealing with, struggling with, are the same things that we do on the other side with the other programs. Financial aid is really simple. There's not much to it. It's very straightforward until you're on the other side of it and you're applying for it. Someone's telling you, okay, it's going to cost maybe this. Here's some of the things you might be eligible for. But you have all of these unknowns. And again, as the parent or as the student, and you're walking through this maze of things, it's challenging. It's emotional. It is very personal. But again, if you're on the outside kind of looking in, you just fill out a few forms and it's all done for you. But when you talk about people, their most prized possession being their child or themselves and their dreams of higher education, and then trying to find the means to accomplish that, again, it's challenging just because of the emotions involved. So I think you're dealing with the same thing there that we are with the other programs too. Sorry, that's Marcus's 2 cents. Thoughts, questions?
I just want to make a quick kind of a comment. A lot of people are supplying information on previous Hazelwood recipients that's been ongoing. I'm not quite sure what the deadline is for those submissions this week, last week. So there's a fairly exhaustive study being conducted by the LBB in collaboration with the coordinating board, looking at the last 4 years of Hazelwood recipients to see how they're doing and what their grades are they graduating, are they persisting, all the normal things that people are interested in. So
that's a report for the LBB?
The LBB is conducting the report for the legislature.
Okay.
Some of you are providing information.
Dan, I had a question the other day from a school about the $30 million that was appropriated to offset some of the cost of Hazelwood. Is that, as far as you know, a one-shot deal, or there's no, that particular action was a one-time thing, and it would require, it did not obligate any kind of future activities of the same sort?
That particular action was a one-time, but Rufus is going to talk about the other option.
What a segue. The $30 million was for fiscal year 13. Subsequent years, or the legislature through Senate Bill 1158 did establish a trust fund, the proceeds to be managed by the state. I think $247 million. I'm not exactly sure that's the amount, but it's close. That trust fund will be, the proceeds from that will be distributed to help defray the cost of the legacy program. This is the transfer program for Hazelwood. There have been, I've been to a couple of meetings on that. I think that is the process, the procedures, and all follow closely with those for the management of other state trust funds. That's going to be an annual award. It will most likely not cover the total expense for Hazelwood Legacy, but I think it's important to note that Legacy was highlighted in the legislative session as being an issue that the schools had the largest problem with. So the legislature determined that this amount would help defray that cost. The guesstimate on what the proceeds will be, take a pick. It's probably not going to perform any better or any worse than any of the other state trust funds. The figures I have heard range in the $15 to $25 million per annum guess. That's what it is. It's a guess. And then that will be distributed through the LBB and the comptroller's office based on the percentage of legacy enrollees, somewhat similar to the allocation of the initial $30 million.
I was going to comment that just last week I had the parents got referred to my office to see if I could answer questions. And so our parents look for, they want to understand. And, I don't even feel adequate to be able to answer their questions that I would answer them correctly. So I refer them to the local university and to that department to be able to answer. So there is parents and students questions out there, and they're surprised when they do qualify for the benefits, and it is a great asset in for their collegiate funds.
Well, please refer them to us. We will. We're not totally inundated yet. I'll scream and holler and ask for more folks when we get to that point. But please refer them to our office. We'll be happy to provide information.
And I have heard positive feedback from our business office regarding the transition. And part of it is because of that relationship that you have with the students. And so that will help tremendously with the communications.
One of the challenges that I see at our place is you've got so many different offices involved. You've got your VA coordinators, and then you've got the ones who are applying the exemptions and the waivers, and then coordinating that then with our other financial aid. So it is kind of one of those that's it can be challenging to deal with because of the different number of parties, but wonderful opportunity to really make a huge impact to these families. And I didn't mention our student representative who had the questions and comments is Kayla Klein from UT Dallas. So I didn't give a name with that.
If I could just add something, can you hear me? The report that will be required of the institutions for Hazelwood for spring 2014 will be due April 30th, and that reporting will still come to the coordinating board. Okay.
The date again, April
30th.
April 30th, 2014, which is just around the corner. Okay. More comments, thoughts, questions, or things that you would like to share?
Thank you very much for the opportunity to appear before you. And please, if you have questions, there are no stupid questions. Call us. And, that one question that you're hesitant to ask is the one that everybody else wants to know. So, don't be bashful. Give us a call and we'll try to help you. And if we don't know the answer, we'll try to get it. Thank you.
I anticipate hearing from you on an ongoing basis with this committee. Again, as we all have to kind of work together on this one, and it's a big one. But thank you very much.
Could I ask a question about exemptions and waivers, of which Hazelwood is just one? One of the legislative proposals in a bill that did not get passed was that institutions be required to identify an office on campus that people would know to go to get information about exemptions and waivers. It was not the thought that one office would be administering all the exemptions and waivers, but that at least there would be a point of contact at the school that we could mention on our website or refer people to, because right now we don't know for exemptions and waivers whether it's a business office, admissions office, financial aid office, and so forth. So we typically send them to financial aid with the thought that you will know who it is, even if it isn't your office, but that's inefficient. So the thought was to have every institution name a contact point for exemptions and waivers so students and parents would know, and our agency, for instance, would know where to send people or to send information that might be useful to them. Could I hear the committee response to such a thing? Is that a difficult thing for institutions to do?
Now, at the University of North Texas, we do have a Veterans Center, and we have our business office staff there, and they're the ones that process the Hazelwood and exemptions. And we also have our registrar's office there, and our members from each of those offices. Our registrar's office, they process the GI bills, the certifications for the veterans benefits. And then we also have a representative from the financial aid office that goes twice a week to answer questions for students. And it has been very successful.
Okay,
So
good.
we do have a centralized place.
It sounds like you have a good handle on what to do with the veterans programs. My part of my issue is for the other 61 exemption and waiver programs. Where do the students go for information? So, I mean, we can leave it with the idea that we refer them to financial aid, and you then take it from there, if that's appropriate. And what is the thought of the group? Should we be recommending that move for a single contact point go anywhere?
On our campus, almost all of them are done through the Student Business Services Office. They're not done through financial aid. So referring them to us just means we're going to refer them to somebody else.
Uh-huh.
And I don't know, I mean, I think it's probably different on every campus. It's on.
Okay.
So.
Well, and the challenge there, the Hazelwood portion is different than those other ones. Mm-hmm. Because there's probably someone else on the campus that's dealing with that as far as setting it up, coordinating it with other VA type things.
I mean, waivers and exemptions are handled differently across campus, but if you're looking for a single point of contact that knows all the exemptions and waivers, our business office would be the better point of contact than our financial aid office. Yep.
Well, should we be, is that true at all institutions?
No.
No?
At Collin, admissions does part of them, financial aid does part of them, and Bursar does part of them.
But if we forwarded all queries or we advise people to go to an office on your campus for that information, would it be the business office or?
It depends.
Okay.
Well, ultimately, the business office is the one that's actually dealing with the money part of it. So I think, to Joe's point, sending it to the business office would be the right initial source. And then if it happens otherwise, then they will forward it to us. But, we're the same as Joe. All, the exemptions, waivers do go through business office. So.
Okay.
And if y'all are keeping a database of contact points, again, my 2 cents there would be ask the universities who you would like to use, and there, instead of having those students go to like our business office where the other exemptions and waivers go, I would have that work through our VA coordinators, because that one is very specific for you and there's different rules that come into play. Again, that's at my university.
Can I just say, though, I mean, so if the goal was to identify a point of contact at an institution that the coordinating board could refer people to, you could request that information from us now, and we would provide it to you. I don't know that we need legislation to do it. So.
Okay. Well, and again, the part of what we're talking about, for instance, we had Senate Bill 1210 get passed this last session that dealt with exemptions and waivers, and we really weren't sure whom to send information to. So we kind of sent it shotgun approach to everybody we could think of, and we probably still missed the moat on some of them. And so maybe we can just send out a query inviting people to identify the location on campus that these things should go to, and just take that initiative and do it ourselves.
Well, and the challenge here is I like one stop where we can give them the information where they can go and get those questions answered. This is one of those where I think if you have a single point that's the same for all schools, you can guarantee that they're going to have to be handed off at least one more time, and that's not efficient, and I think that creates those challenges for those students that, okay, now I'm getting the runaround. So I think it's going to be different at each school, but ask who's the best place to start with. I think that's a good approach.
Thank you.
More questions?
Could they design like a fact sheet or that would have a listing that could be given to a student or parent that has those questions that each university would be able to?
Are you talking about all exemptions and waivers?
Yeah. I don't know if it would be lengthy, but
we attempt to have a fair share of that on our website, where we have all the different exemptions and waivers in a fact sheet included. And that's a massive amount of information. So what I was thinking is, if we have a contact point that's been identified per institution, we could perhaps, when you go to exemptions and waivers on our website, click on this school contacts and find out for each school where you ought to go with your question. And so that way the student is getting more directly to the information they need. Okay, that sound like a reasonable thing? Okay, thank you.
Thank you again. We appreciate your time. Next point, discussion and consideration of ways to facilitate the processing of state grants for transfer students. We've got 5 minutes allocated for this. Okay. And I believe Sophia.
She's the lady in green there.
Is there a PowerPoint? Is that what that
Yes.
was? Okay. You have a PowerPoint handout.
If you haven't misplaced it. There it is. Sophia, be sure and identify yourself when you get ready to speak.
And it's kind of neat having coordinating board staff members here because, you know, we email with these folks, we talk to them on the phone, but to actually have a face that goes with it, it's refreshing as well.
Thank you.
A secure method to obtain transfer student award history in a user-friendly format, and to deliver prior award information that can be used to determine student eligibility. And I did work with institutions, and I called around and talked to financial aid advisors to get input. What we came up with was a process that would allow schools to submit to the coordinating board via secure file transfer in a tab delimited format, which could easily come from Excel. What the school could submit to us was an unfiltered list of transfer students. And this way, you could just send in a list of 1,000 students, and we would tell you, 8 of those students got Texas grant, or 5 of those students got top 10. The input data would be a student ID, whether or not the ID is a social security number, date of birth, first name, and last name, and that's it. The results would be further identifying information just to confirm that we're all talking about the same student. It's not Jessica or Juana, it's the same person you were looking for. Cumulative information of award history, and then most recently reported information.
Sophia, could you go back?
I don't know what I just did. Yeah.
Could you go back a slide?
Yes.
So the student ID and whether or not it is an SSN or not, could you explain that a little further?
Yeah, actually, I got feedback. I was talking to Joycelyn at Texas A&M yesterday evening, and we discussed this input data, and the information, whether it is or is not a student ID, is whether the ID reported is a social security number or a school assigned ID for a house bill student. She said on her campus that's very difficult to identify, that it happens in the financial aid office, and if I was just going to let her submit a long list of students, that it would just be easier for her to submit a list of student IDs, first name, last name, date of birth. But that's why we're here, to ask for feedback. So if it is difficult to receive, it's supposed to be easy, and if identifying whether the ID is or is not a social is difficult, then we can live without it, and then it's up to you to find out whether it is or is an ID later.
What is this data querying off of? Is the FADES report, the database?
Good question. No, it's actually going to be querying off of the end of year report.
Okay.
So we're going to be, if everyone else is already familiar with the verification screen, similar to the way that you put in a social security number and then receive verification, or now it's called award history screen, and it says the student and the last year reported. That's what you're going to be receiving. Only you'll be able to kind of throw it up against the wall and see what sticks, and give us whatever you want. Okay, so again, you'll get a clear picture of the award history for the student. We do have a disclaimer. The information provided does not determine student eligibility. It's only there to assist, and it will be available for Texas Grant, TEOG, Top 10, and TEG. So the results information that will be the output information, again, will be identifying information just to be sure we're all on the same page. It'll give you back the student's ID number, first name, last name. You'll receive cumulative information, so it'll identify the first semester, or whether the first semester awarded was a spring or fall, the first year that the student was initially awarded, and then the year-to-date number of semesters that have passed since then. Because Texas Grant, TEOG, and even TEG have, and Top 10 all have limitations to the number of years that a student can be awarded. We do it in semesters because it's from 5 years from the first semester awarded, so it's a total of 10 semesters. So you will be able to identify whether the student, even if they were last reported eligible, whether they can even continue to be awarded if they've already reached their maximum number of years. Okay. The last thing that you'll receive on the output data is going to be the most recently reported information. And I think this would be the most helpful because it'll identify whether the student was last reported meeting the renewal requirements, SAP, their last reported GPA, and total hours completed. So this last slide is a sample of what the output data would be. Ideally, we're going to give you a report that is also tab delimited, that could be copy pasted into Excel, and that way you can export it however you want and use it however you need. In this example, you'll see that all the students, it says first year awarded, how many year-to-date semesters they've been in the program, and we can pretend for now that it's top or Texas Grant. So here you'll see the last student has been in the program for 12 semesters. Even though they meet the renewal requirements in the most recently reported end of year report, they wouldn't be eligible for continuation award. But for those schools who are now going to be required to look up information for TEOG to see if they're eligible for initial Texas Grant, you can just submit to me a list of all your transfer students. They don't have to self-identify. They don't have to say, I think I got a TOG. I think I got a TEG. I don't really know what I got. And they'll submit that, and you'll be able to see whether or not they'll be eligible or if they meet the requirements for the program. Any questions? Oh, one last thing. The input file, although it's unfiltered data and you're going to be submitting as many students as you want, each program will need a new file. So it's 1,000 kids for Texas Grant, you submit that and you put Texas Grant on it. You want to check TOG, same 1,000 kids, you put TOG on it. And you want to check TEG, which right now doesn't even have a verification screen, you can check TEG to see if anyone's eligible for TEG, and it'll give you the information that we have in our database for TEG. And Top 10. Currently, I get emails, and I have to securely email back whether or not the student's eligible for Top 10. You'll be able to submit 1,000 students to say, hey, are any of these eligible for Top 10? And you'll get that information back. Any ideas or suggestions for this process?
Sophia.
Yes.
Can you speak a little bit about the timing, since this relies on end-of-year report data?
Yes.
Then we have the issue that packaging starts before those reports come in for the most recent year.
Yeah, it will. Well, I mean, that's a great question. We will allow for schools to pull information throughout the entire year. But it'll also identify when this was last reported. So you'll get the most accurate information in July. Once all the end of years are closed, then you're going to get the most recent information. But this is only to assist you. So if you know that you have all these transfer students and you're looking to see who got TEOG, you could look to see that they received a previous year award and then see their transcripts and say, oh, this kid is transferring now and has met the 24-hour requirement, even though the last reported information is only 12 hours, having received TEOG. So it's only there to assist you. It's not, it doesn't really determine eligibility, but it would be available for as soon as the end of year closes for that year, and you can run it anytime throughout the year.
You did say we can upload the file.
Yeah, secure file transfer, very similar to the way that you do all of your end-of-year reports. And ideally, we're working with the process of it being tab delimited, so you can start off with Excel, save it as a text, and it'll only have student ID, first name, last name, date of birth.
Will you be providing a template or the layout for that so we can program our systems?
Sure. Yeah, and I talked to IT people at schools, and it's a query. It's a very simple query, since we're not telling them to look for previously identified as a Texas grant recipient or TOG recipient. Since we're saying just give us anyone you want, and you don't even have to check to see if they're Texas residents, just give us a list. They're like, oh, well, that's a piece of cake.
Exactly. You betcha. So, I mean, we're just going to extract our whole database.
Yeah.
And run it through.
Yeah. Well, I mean, ideally, that's the way we want it to work.
Well, we're a small school, so it's not going to overwhelm the system. A&M, maybe that creates a problem for you.
Yeah, maybe you can do it in pieces. So,
is there a timeline?
We hope to have it once we have, enough feedback and everyone agrees with the input-output data. If there's anything missing, if there's any suggestions about information that you want, any additional columns of information that you're looking for that we could provide, or any of the input data that you don't think is necessary or cannot provide or would be difficult to provide. Once we've all, hear some feedback, then we'll start the process, and we're hoping to have this available by the end of year this year, so end of July.
One thing I could see maybe that would be helpful is to provide the school or schools where they did receive the prior awards.
Great
so
suggestion.
So if there's questions, we can call and work through that.
That's a good suggestion. And we can provide you the information of the last reported FICE code. Our FICE code's easy? Or name. It'd just be longer.
For the transfer students into Texas Grant, one of the questions is going to be, one of the requirements is that they receive TEOG in fall 2014 or later. You have the year that they got the last award, but not the semester.
Yeah, we actually do. It's in the cumulative information. So you'll see it where, if you're looking at this sheet, the green section is first semester awarded and first year awarded. So you'd be looking for 1 and 2014.
Well, it could have been
or later
continuation award. Yeah. Right. So a student who got it in 2013 but not in fall 2014 is not eligible for the transfer option.
Right, but you would only look under the green section for first year, right? So you're looking at first year award fall 2014?
Yeah, I don't think there was an indication you had to get your initial award in TEOG in fall 2014, just that you have received. I may need to look, I'll research that
I think
some
it's, you got your initial award prior to fall 14.
No, I think there's a requirement. I think one of the problems we had with implementing the statute is that requirement of it being in fall 2014 puts the implementation of the transfer option into spring 2015. Let us look it up and we'll confirm it. But again, we may want to do something that will help us identify those who received it in a particular semester as opposed to the year. And it may be a continuation award, but we'll get that information sorted out.
I think that with the information provided, they can determine whether they're meeting the eligibility. I wouldn't want our system to tell you that they're meeting or not meeting the eligibility. It's there to assist you. So if it's,
we would love for you to tell us. But,
I'll tell you.
But we understand those.
No one's eligible.
Too.
I'm just kidding. No, yeah, it's there to assist. So if the information, if you need something else to assist you with it, then we'll be happy to provide you. But it doesn't determine. So.
First and foremost, fantastic. This is a wonderful tool. I think it will be very beneficial going forward. There are probably some tweaks that we will want to make, but it's a fantastic place to start. Again, my 2 cents. Can you all think of some other things that we'd like to have added to it that will help? We do a half dozen awards a year, so it's not a big thing for us. But again, to be able to load everybody in there, that student who doesn't really let us know, I think we'll be able to identify a couple of others.
I think students have the impression that we all know whether or not they've received a grant. I think it's funny when I say, well, we have to let the financial aid office know. But it's a state grant. and they're a state school. And I'm like, yeah, but you still have to let them know. They have the impression that we're sharing information. And at least this way, we could look to see if they didn't self-identify because they think you magically somehow know. Now you'll be able to provide the information, or we'll be able to provide the information to you.
Sophia, just a question about the students who don't have a social security number.
Right.
So we would send our institutionally assigned ID.
Okay, so that's another great question. I talk about that in the presentation. I kind of skimmed over it, and I apologize. If the student, okay, so if you give me a list and you're giving me your school assigned ID, and this is a transfer student, it's likely that I'm not going to have any information because you just gave me their most recent ID. So in that case, I need their old ID. I need the ID where they were previously awarded. So their main, this would go back to them self-identifying, and once you have that ID, if you had a list or if there was a way for you to create a list, you could submit it all at once and then check to see did they receive an award. You can also use our website, but since you're a private school, you can't use.
Yeah. No.
So you would create a list and submit it to us, and then we would give you the output file.
So for my students without a social, I mean, would the thing to do be to put their social in the ID field and tell you it's a social, and there's a possibility the previous school also reported them? I mean,
yes.
if they have a taxpayer ID or something like that. Yeah,
that's what Joycelyn said yesterday. A lot of students will use their tax ID number and use it as their social. Yeah. And if you submitted the report with that ID, and I wasn't asking for you to identify whether or not it is a social, just asking for the ID. If they previously used it, they would automatically pull up.
Okay.
So if that's the ID number they've been using, we can use that to pull it up. And then later you'll tell us it's really not a social, but this is their ID.
Thanks.
Any more questions or suggestions?
I was just going to make a comment that a lot of our students that stay locally at UTB, whether it's the CAP program or they're going to transfer, and quite a number of them feel like, okay, do I have to tell the new institution that I have a Texas grant or that I have top 10% because they're really counting on that money, otherwise they can't go. And so I don't know how the students can know that they don't really have to do anything. That
I still think they should. I don't think that you should tell them not to do it.
Okay.
Especially if they're House Bill students and they came with a different ID number, like she just mentioned, then you do want them to self-identify. This is just a method in case they get kind of lost in the shuffle, that we could at least attempt to find them and attempt to find their award and award history information.
I know that at UT, Dr. Thompson has an email, and they can just go ahead and forward an email and let them know that they were, receiving that, and it's the find it or whatever, and they send it there, and then that's the process for UT. But I don't know everybody else's process. But
well, this would be an aid. If he received 15, 16 emails, then he could put their information into either our website or in this list, and then just run the report and find out what their previous award history is. And sometimes, especially now with the TEOG transfer, they may think I got Texas grant, and they really did get TEOG. I don't know why they get confused by that, but they do. So.
When they hear grant, or they hear Texas.
They hear grant, yeah. They hear Texas,
a lot of our
right.
kids received a TPEG, and they think, oh, yeah, that's a Texas grant.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think it's better for the student to provide that extra piece of information. They're the one who's going to benefit from it or not benefit from it. So it's in their best interest to make sure that the school does know, too. But this is an effort also, or an opportunity
on our part,
for us to be a little more proactive and grab and find that information, too.
I agree.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have something.
Okay.
Can I go now? They gave me a different thing. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. So we're about to award our transfer students in May 2014 for 14-15.
14-15,
I would be willing to be a test school.
Yeah.
If we provided you a list of our transfer students, even though we know end of year data is not until June and the real stuff won't be available until July, but if I could already have like the heads up that this transfer student that's coming to us has received Texas grant or top 10% somewhere else, we'll do the additional follow-up, but at least if I had that information prior to the awarding, then
Great suggestion.
Would we be able to do that?
Yeah, it's a query on our part. So as long as we have the information in an Excel format sent securely through DataMotion secure email, you can be our test subjects. And that way, when we send out the information, you can see how clear and how user-friendly it is, and give us feedback. So if there are schools who are wanting to do this, we have a method now where we can run it right now. I mean, it really is just a query. So you can talk to the program representative for Texas Grant, which is Sheba Spears, or Joella Martinez for TOG, and ask her, hey, can I send you a list? Sophia said I can, secure email, and can you give me back whether or not these students have received an award?
Right.
And we'd be happy to do that. That way we can get some real feedback, and I think that's a great suggestion.
That's awesome.
Yay.
And then on the date of birth, you'll give us the format 2-digit month, 2-digit year.
Yes,
or, like,
we will give you a format.
No slashes and no dashes in social security number.
No dashes.
Just so we're sending it to you in the right format.
Yeah, no, there is. I have. We do have a test instruction manual that I would be happy to send out for any school that wants to participate in testing.
Could I ask that you send that to the members of the committee?
I will send that to the members of the
I
committee.
anticipate you'll have a lot of beta testers on this.
Okay, great. That sounds good.
You'll have 145 beta testers.
145 beta testers. Awesome.
I'd like to congratulate Sophia for running with this as she has. This is a far broader tool than we had asked her to look at, and she's done a nice job, so thank you.
Thank you.
Excellent. And I think the simplicity of the file layout that just enhances it more. So
And I
well
think
done.
I'm going to go ahead and take the suggestion and take out whether or not is a Social Security or is not a Social Security out, and just let you guys submit IDs, first name, last name, and date of birth. Because that will be easier on your part to give us the information, then we'll let you know.
Does this work? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, because that other thing's not working. Anyways, I was thinking about that because I think the only people is the House Bill students because, of the 99 number or whatever number they might have in there. But for the most part, all our other students, we have their FAFSA that has their Social Security number. So you're really talking maybe 80%, 85%, where we do have an SSN. So why can't we share that? I mean, it's just going to be those few House Bill students. We can look them up or whatever. I
guess how the information that who's pulling your information? Who would be pulling this list? It would be the financial aid office. And does the financial aid office, when they pull this list, can they clearly identify whether the student is this number that they have listed is a Social Security number or not? Okay.
Like she said, it's either 999. I think they just changed it to 888 or something like that because of something that, came about. But I think most of us would be able to.
So on your end, you would run a query and then run another one to say anything with 999 or 888 is or is not a social. So I'm just trying to eliminate that step for you. So you can just send me 999 888 and you don't have to say is or is not a social. It's just one less step on your part that you have to do. So we don't need it. We don't want to do it. Right. That's what that's it. I didn't realize I didn't need it until I was talking to Joycelyn yesterday, and I was like, I really don't need this. I'm going to give you back the identifying information that I have in my database. So if my database says Jessica and yours says Juana, we've got an issue. So, but otherwise, we're hopefully talking all about the same student. So.
Let me clarify. It's still in the testing mode.
It is still in the testing mode. We will be working.
We may have other people listening, and you might get
more suggestions. Yeah. Yes, we are still in the testing mode. As a matter of fact, I don't have IT time until mid-March to actually put this in production. So I can get all the feedback till then, and then once we get it in the clear, I guess we'll send it back to the committee and say this is going to be the final one, and then move forward from March because we want to have it available again by the end of July. And our IT takes some time, so I want to give them more than enough time. Okay.
Well done.
Thank you.
Do we want to take a real quick break? Do we want to continue? And if you need to take a break, you just go ahead and step out. Okay, we'll do the latter. We're going to continue going through. I have an early flight, so I'm motivated to keep us going through. Welcome, Ron. Let's see.
I think this one's mine.
And this is, okay. Discussion and possible consideration of how Texas grants and TEOG awards should interact. And again, another very quick one, I'm sure. And this will be with Jane.
When you had a chance to read through the minutes of the last meeting, when we had the discussion about how to identify the number of hours and or semesters that a student transferring into the Texas Grant Program at a university would have based on the hours they had before coming in, et cetera. We got answers to the basic questions about we're going to take the number of hours that were transferred and subtract it from 150, and that's the balance of hours that they could have in Texas Grant. And then if you divide that balance of hours by 15, that's the number of semesters. So we've got that basic answer to that. But in the context of that discussion, a lot of other policy questions cropped up. And we felt that maybe we ought to spend a little more time with those and see where we ought to go. You should have one handout with you that's called Unresolved Policy Issues, RA Texas Grants, and TEOG. I've mentioned what was agreed upon. Among the things that came up in the discussion but were not finalized, I don't believe, was do you count all transfer hours when you're coming up with this, or only transfer hours that count towards the student's degree? And then should there be a total limit on the number of hours of state aid a student can receive when you combine TEOG and Texas Grant? Now, these were unexpected issues that came up in that discussion, but they're relevant issues that we probably ought to address. And so I'd like to kind of open the floor to ideas, suggestions, comments on those two questions. Should all transfer hours be counted against the 150 hours of Texas Grant eligibility, or only those accepted by the receiving institution, and within that purview, only those accepted by the receiving institution as counting toward the degree? So where do we go from here? Any suggestions?
Hearing none.
We're going to have to write a rule to decide to describe to institutions how they do this. So the more detail we have, the more consistency there's going to be in how these issues are handled by the institutions. On the other hand, if we don't care, we can leave it up to the institution to make the decision, and then we get slightly mixed fruit with what we get from them, but we're not having to mandate all of the details of what you do. So from our standpoint, not answering the question is kind of nice. It leaves it up to you. But on the other hand, we get mixed results.
Well, I like not having to tell you. I mean, it's easier. Initially, when admissions looks at transcripts and counts, we get all the transfer credit, but then not all of it counts towards their current degree plan. So, if we were to count and have it said to us, we have to, that would count against the student. So, I mean, I kind of like leaving it open. I don't know about the rest of y'all.
What happens when a student changes majors? Do any of the hours that were disallowed suddenly become?
Well, for our SAP, we initially count it, but then we look at it in terms of, whether those hours counted or not. It's kind of complex, actually, because of the way, it gets counted in the system. I mean, it's just one generic, everything gets counted in. I don't know if that's the way it is at other institutions, but then when we're looking at their specific degree plan, if, let's say that they have exceeded their 150, that's part of what we look at to see, well, is it really that, they've attempted that many hours, or how many actually count towards that particular degree plan. So we look at that even in, deciding whether they're going to continue or not. Do y'all do it differently or the same? Yeah. So I like it open. I don't know. Joe, you're kind of looking pensive there. What do you think?
On my end, okay, on these students, if I log into the database and I look up the hours that they've been paid on at maybe wherever they're coming from, like if they're coming from ACCD, now they're coming to our campus, they got paid on those hours. Are you saying you don't count those hours? Because when they do transfer in to our school, like if I'm talking about a Texas grant, why wouldn't I count the hours that other school paid on for Texas grant, even though we didn't accept all those hours?
Now,
or maybe I'm thinking something differently.
One thing to mention is that we're talking about the context of the question. I'm sorry if I didn't make that clear. Is the two-year college student who is transferring into the university in spring 2015 or later because they can't get a Texas grant at a two-year institution. So they don't have any Texas grant hours up to that point. It's a matter of them becoming initial Texas grant recipients, but they have hours under their belt. So, like the AD student who enters Texas grant, we consider that AD to be the equivalent of 60 hours, so we only give them 90 hours of Texas grant eligibility. So now we have the possibility of someone transferring in as soon as they have 24 hours, as long as they have that TEOG in fall 2014 or later. And so the question was, does that student now have 126 hours of Texas grant eligibility? And does that change whether all of those hours are transferred in or only some of them are, that's where the confusion comes up. Does that help?
So the student who gets Texas grant and then transfers in.
That's just a renewal student.
Right, but so those hours are counting against the 150-hour limit.
Certainly the previous hours with the Texas grant would be counted because they're in the database and they would be counted. Yes.
So, part of me goes, and the easy answer is leave it open, let institutions decide. However, if you're not going to count the hours for which they got TEOG, then you're going to treat the student who's getting TEOG differently than the student who's got Texas grant. Is that a concern that you're doing that differently?
Sorry, this is not my field of expertise.
Your concern, too, would be to follow the rule that Texas grant has set. If you're transferring with a TEOG and going to be eligible for the Texas grant at the new institution, then I would think that you would follow the rule that was set by a student who had Texas grant moving in. If you're considering those hours.
So are you suggesting the TEOG hours would be counted as if they were Texas grant hours?
Yes.
Okay. I don't know that we can, if we have the authority to enable that. Dan, do you have a sense, is that a legislative thing or is it something we can do by rule?
I don't have the code handy, but I would suspect that a state aid hour is a state aid hour, whatever flavor it might be.
But it wasn't Texas grant, so
I understand that.
I see what you're saying, but it really wasn't. It was just another grant, just like if it was an SEOG. So, equitable, they didn't really get those dollars. So, I don't know.
I guess
it's a money thing. Bottom line, do we really have all the money? But as far as grant, it's not a Texas grant. So
if I take 60 hours at a community college paid for with TEOG and I don't get an associate's degree and I transfer to a university, there isn't anything about me that suggests that student ought to get 150 hours of Texas grant on top of their 60 hours of TEOG. To me, that's just patently wrong. I don't know if it's in the statute like that. We'd have to go back and look at that. But there's an inherency of 150 hours as being a limitation on a university's worth of state aid. And the subcomponents of that are we're in a transition period of having distinct subcomponents of that 150 hours. So we're going to have a transition period we're going to have to manage through. Now, we'll have to go back and look at the statute and see what it specifically states and see what the legal interpretation of that is. But
and I guess another question is whether if the current statute does not enable that to be handled that way, if indeed it would treat, you're now entering a new program, so you have the full eligibility in the new program. Is this a policy that we should advocate being put into legislation to save money, to stretch state grant dollars, saying no individual getting state grant dollars between TEOG and Texas grant is to receive a sum between the two of more than 150 hours of state grant? TEOG, by the way, because of the target amounts, TEOG can be higher than the Texas grant award that student is getting.
because of the bifurcation of the programs that was put into SB 215, it wasn't necessarily, there wasn't a clear, delineated, beginning to end statute written that would give us specific instructions on what to do.
Right.
So I think there's going to be some interpretation that's going to have to be made. And again, we'll have to go back and look at the statute. Maybe this is something we bring back up at the next committee meeting. We'll have a legal interpretation at that point, and we can work off of that. Does that seem fair?
Well, but I would like to ask if, regardless of whether the current legislation allows us to do that or not, if it doesn't allow us, is this a policy that we should propose to the legislature for state aid? And I don't know if we're looking for legislative agenda items or not.
No, we're not.
Okay.
Well,
Moving right along.
I think one of the premises is what does the 150 hours mean? So is the 150 hours a limitation for the number of hours that a student can take to be eligible for Texas grant? Or is the 150 hours a limitation on the number of hours for which they can get Texas grant? And those are two different questions. The 150-hour limitation is more in line with the 30-hour excess credit hour rule and those kind of things, which it's kind of, that to me is where the clarification needs to be. Is the limitation on this is how many hours for which you can receive the grant, or this is the number of hours for which a student can be receiving any type of state aid?
If you want to take a 5-minute break, I can get a copy of the statute. I think the wording in the statute now was such that that's what caused us to interpret it as being its hours paid for with Texas grant, as opposed to cumulative hours taken. Because I think it said no student may receive a Texas grant for more than 150 hours. I think that's the wording in current statute.
Which I actually don't agree with the interpretation that you took, because I think that language could easily be interpreted to mean 150 total hours, period, not 150 hours for which you get the grant. But
okay.
I'm glad the Financial Aid Advisory Committee informed our decision that we came to that interpretation however many years ago it was.
I'm sure we have the minutes.
How do we want to proceed?
We have homework we need to do. We need to have this on the next agenda. That's
okay.
It's third and long from our 5, and we're punting.
Well, I think it's prudent to find out what legally we can do. That's not a bad place to start.
Okay.
It probably saves some discussions down the road. Okay, moving on then, and we'll bring that back up next time. Discussion of the financial aid negotiated rulemaking at the coordinating board and results to date. That would be Dan.
This will be brief. So of the committee, who's been on a committee so far? A number of you have already been on committees. So we've finished the Be On Time for private institutions. We finished TEG for private institutions last fall, and those were adopted by our board in January. The work study committee finally reached a consensus a couple of weeks ago. It was a very hotly contested battle over those $5 million of work study that are available. But it was informative discussion, I think, being one of the few programs now that are cross sector. So we had all the sectors were involved, so everybody was very engaged in the process. TEOG, is that the next one, or do we already have that one?
We don't, we've had one meeting.
We've had one meeting on TEOG, and we were sent back to run some calculations, run some numbers on what the impacts of the various, they're all starting to run together now.
Oh, I understand.
And then Texas Grant, the first meeting of Texas Grant starts next week. And I think we have 15 pages of data to send out to the committee members for things that they may want to contemplate. I think the one common factor that we've been trying to get out of the negotiated rulemaking is to try to simplify the allocation methodology and try to tie them all back to FAD's prior year FAD submission. We have gotten into a mode which has been fine, but it gets complicated of trying to do real-time allocations of what's going on today so that your allocations next year would be the most accurate as possible. But it creates a lot of operational headaches for us to do that. So most of the rulemaking has been around trying to use prior year data that's been certified, that's readily available to everybody, and gets us out of more trying to do everything rushed at the last minute. And I think that's been received fairly well from the different committees. I don't think I've
Review of data before it's
so one of the common phrases in all of the negotiated rulemaking is making the allocations available to institutions and giving you 10 working days to review to make sure that the data we are using we captured it accurately. So not necessarily giving you an opportunity to recertify your FADS data, but making sure that if we have 100 student count, you can verify that, yes, I submitted 100 student count, then you accurately captured 100 student count. So it's more of a data verification at the campuses, and there's a time period that essentially it's open for disclosure before the final allocations are posted, which is good. I think I'm not sure that, potentially when people really look at their data really, really closely, they always want to change something because they always think that there's something wrong. So it'll be interesting to see how that 10-day period comes about. So beyond Texas Grant, I think we will have finished all of the financial aid allocations that we're required to do. There are a lot of other negotiated rulemakings going on at the coordinating board for a whole host of variety of different programs. Essentially all of our trustee funds that have some allocation embedded in them are all going to go through negotiated rulemaking at some point in time. And I've been on all the committees for the allocations, and I think they're great because they become your allocations, and as long as we're still kind of following in line with what the intent of the program is, it's been good. And I think going forward, it'll be positive that we can lock in on some methodologies and keep them in place for many years and not change them. So
I think it provides some transparency, and when you have those interested parties involved, there's some ownership there too. So it probably does work very well for both different populations.
And the consensus has been unanimous consensus so far for all the committees. So the whole committee has to agree on the outcome, which gives everybody the opportunity to basically cry foul if they want to and stop the process or make the process be more thoughtful. But ultimately, if the committee doesn't ever reach a consensus, then ultimately it falls to the board to make that call. So there is a finality of the board being involved if the committee can't reach a unanimous consensus. So been good.
And the changes that have been agreed upon for Be On Time, TEG, and Work Study will be applied for allocations for this coming year. And the TEOG one and Texas grant for 2016.
2016, correct.
Right, so we will go ahead and do next year's allocations in TEOG and Texas grant using the old methodology, because the timeline will just not be good for waiting.
One question on the NEGREG. When will the preliminary rules, and this came from a listener, when will the preliminary rules for the negotiated rulemaking committee meeting on March 5th regarding Texas grant be available or sent out to the members?
When will the preliminary rules?
Well, the items for discussion, so folks can prepare.
We have some materials that are supposed to go out before the week is out. I think there are two main documents that are going out. The current methodology that's in practice, so that people have that as a reference. And then we ran 5 years of data for Texas grant, well, for university students that would potentially be Texas grant eligible. So there's Pell information and persistence rates and upper division Pell, lower division Pell, and Texas grant, and a variety of different scenarios, so that the committee then could have more data besides just what their prior allocations were. Those will be going out probably today or tomorrow, I would suspect.
Okay.
But there won't be we've been doing straw man rules. There won't be a straw man for Texas grant, simply because I find Dan's perspective is straw men lead you down to a conclusion that we don't want to presuppose on Texas grant. We didn't do one for TEOG for the very fact that we didn't necessarily want to do what we were currently doing. We wanted to do what the committee wanted to do. And I thought it was beneficial for the TEOG rule to do that. So I'm hopeful the Texas grant will be the same way.
I guess the only other thing to mention is that once the committee rules are drafted, they still get posted to the Texas Register for comment, and those comments need to be addressed. So even if we get it, the work study rules are currently posted in the Register, and if they're going to our board for adoption in April, but if indeed we got comments that were substantive that needed to go back to the committee, that could be postponed till the following board meeting. So that would be the circumstance under which work study would be done using the old methodology instead of the new one. So the finish line is a little less predictable than might like it to be.
Notice of those proposed rules that are in the Register, where do we put that on our listservs and then links, or is that on y'all's web pages for here's where you go to make comments on these proposed rules?
We're beginning to include our rule information in the Q&As. One of the problems we have with that is that the Q&As tend to go out towards the end of the month, and the board meetings tend to be at the end of the month, and so what we end up is giving short notice for the end of the comment period. So we're still trying to figure out how to do that. We used to have rules handled by a particular person in staff for whom that was a significant part of their job. And so at that time, we were sending out memos to all institutions about these are the rules that have been proposed and adopted and that kind of thing. Right now, we don't have the staff to maintain that, or we haven't figured out the most efficient way to do that. So, we're still trying to figure out how best to keep you informed.
I think over time, TASFA's legislative group used to put something out based on the information they probably got from us. Y'all all have a bunch of GR people running around, so I know that they're just scouring the register looking for the latest and greatest. But
I mean, if we're simply telling you that such and such rule has been posted for comment, go to the Texas Register, that's one thing. But if we're telling you go and look at this page of that register and so forth, we start getting into a very time-consuming process. So again, the degree to which we make it easy for you to do that is part of our hang-up as to how best to get that done.
Does Sharon send an email to us now when she posts to the register?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we could send that to...
We could just send it to the distribution list. If you'll
Send it to
just
the
give me
distribution
something, I'll
list.
send it to the distribution list.
Okay. And what that indicates is the program and then the when it was posted, when the comment period begins and when it ends, but it doesn't include how to get to it. You know, so we probably need to add something in the cover, just blurb that says, go to the Texas Register at this site for more information or something.
But at least we'd be getting that information
Yep.
out, and I think that's
More quickly.
what
I think
the
that would be,
important thing
be
is.
beneficial. If there are certain buzzwords to put in there for the search, we'd probably.
It's not hard to find.
Is it not? Okay.
I'm sorry, Lisa?
There probably is a search function on the
Yep.
site.
Yep.
Excellent. More questions, comments? Excellent. Discussion and possible consideration of the interconnections of the CBM 001 and the FADES report. Rosie Juarez, I believe, was going to give our update. She wasn't able to attend, so we're going to let Jane.
You have a handout. You should have a handout labeled FADS and the CBM 001. This is something that's been talked about in several of our meetings, and we're very pleased to feel that some progress is being made on it. There was a meeting on February the 4th that included in its invitees, anyway, people from the TACRO, registrars admissions type offices, and then financial aid folk. And the basic question or issue was that the requirement that you explain every student whose Social Security number or student ID number was not found in the 001 is a massive effort on the part of institutions and something that should be addressed, if possible, in some way to make it simpler. I'm going to kind of read what you have here, but the decision of the group was that the focus of this is going to be on the 1403 students, either students who in the FADS report are identified as being affidavit students, but they're not found in the 001, or students in the 001 that are not located in the FADS report. Those are the ones that institutions in the future will have in their FADS report flagged as errors, and you will have to cure those in order to certify your reports. The other ones that are not involving 1403 students will be warnings only. You will still have the various options in the FADS report. If you do the research and want to identify why they're not in the 001, you will have the option of doing that, but as warnings, you would not be required to give an explanation. So again, you have to explain the errors. You do not have to do so for the warnings. Those will be given for your information only.
So, can I ask clarification? So, if a 1403 student is reported in the 001 but is left out of the FADS because they did not have financial aid,
that's not a problem. the main thing is that everyone who is identified as a 1403 student in the FADS report is identified as enrolled and or why they would not be in the 001 report.
Okay, so then we're not going to get an error message if the student is in the 001 but not in FADS?
They will not be an error. If they're in the FADES and not 001, then they'll show up as an error. But if they're reported for enrollment but not financial aid, they don't have to apply for aid.
Okay. This doesn't say that. This says that there would be an error.
Yeah, and I recognize that, and we'll get a clarification out to you. The expectation is that this could be put in place for the next report due in fall 2014. We have had some turnover in our IT department, and so things of that sort are a little less easy to project, but that's certainly the intent at this time. In that meeting, it was also raised that more of the people in FADS might be identified or matched to enrollment reports if they were compared both to the 001 and to the E01 report, which picks up some students that are not included in the 001. And our folk who are over the data collection for the 001 agreed to run some tests to see if there's a significant improvement in the match by running it against a combination of those two reports. And if indeed it looks like it is useful to add the other, that will be done, but that test will be run before that's implemented. Several of you were in that meeting. Is there anything else, anything I've left out?
The comment regarding there is not a report that the coordinating board receives that contains all enrolled students. That report still does not exist. Our problem, this committee, with that report is the errors trying to match the apples and the oranges together. As they explained to us that the database was pretty much designed to identify the aid that we're given, but to match up and see what the 1403B students were receiving. Getting back kind of to that changed the emphasis really. That solves the biggest issue we're having. Still concerns, thoughts regarding someone should know all the students that are attending higher education in the state. But again, that's not necessarily what this committee is looking at. But that is what it is. It was a great meeting. It was interesting hearing the three different parties and the ideas that they have. Challenge still exists for schools excluding people from their reports. The effort that is involved in excluding those different populations from the 001, that's still very time consuming. And Jane and I heard things differently on there. I thought there was a mechanism where everyone can be reported. She didn't hear it that way. So we're going to follow up with another question there back for the group.
Yeah, it's my understanding, my recollection, which is, as time passes, becoming a little less reliable a source, was that someone in the meeting indicated that there is a report that some institutions used to report students who are not included in the 001, but it's an optional report for the institutions. So there is a way to do it, but the institutions are choosing not to. And that's a part of our uncertainty as to whether that indeed is something that could be used for all of these students in the FADS who are not being picked up in the 001, or if that particular report, now I don't even remember what the number or how it's referred to, whether that has a limited use. And we will look to see, we'll get more information on that for you.
My recollection was that it was available and it is an appropriate avenue, but it is optional and it's not widely used. And the folks that have to start reporting that probably wouldn't want it to be a requirement because we don't want to have those kinds of things. I don't know if it's a viable statewide to get 100% accurate information about who's on campus. So.
And I don't think you ever do. There's too many variables, but to be able to get 95%, I think would probably be pretty close. So.
If the do you know if your institution chooses to use that additional report?
It's kind of like warnings. It's nice to see that it's there, but it's just nice to see that it's there.
Yeah. Okay. There was one other thing that came up in the meeting, and that was the comment that the format of the output document, the error listing for some institutions is massive and overwhelming, and that there could be one person, or there was a strong request to continue to have that particular report available to institutions, but there was a question raised about a more disaggregated error listing where an institution could do a search on a particular kind of error and have all the students with that error be listed, and therefore send that error to the section of their staff that works with that kind of issue to resolve, and then reassemble all this to submit it to the back to the board. And again, there was an acknowledgement of the willingness to look at that, but there was no kind of timeline set for doing it. I think the subcommittee of your committee still has. I assume that, I don't know, what is the role? Does that committee still exist? Do you want them to continue looking at these things? In this case, I think their efforts have had some nice payback.
I think maybe them continuing to work with Susan and Doug, I believe, about maybe the file layout for the summer reports, the error reports, those kind of things. I think that dialogue, that input will still remain helpful to the committee. And what really was being pushed for is basically a file that you can pull into Excel, put your filters on it, and then work through it very quickly, whereas the way that it's coming out now, it doesn't really work that well. I mean, our error report is hundreds of pages long, and again, we're a small school, and to wade through all of that to get down to just the population you need to fix is very cumbersome. So something you can put a filter on, get it to where it needs to be done, and quickly resolved. With the changes that are being made with the error report, I see the number of errors going down to truly a handful. So I think it's already going to be much easier to work through. But again, I think having kind of an Excel type template would benefit us too. So I think there's a little bit more that the subcommittee can do. I think well done to this point. Comments?
Well, for our school, because for UTSA, our FAS report, error report is pretty numerous. But what we do is because we also have the same thing where different people have to resolve the different errors. And of course, because it's sensitive data, so we don't email it because it has SSNs. But anyways, so we just use the Control F and say, here's the errors you're looking for, and it'll take you right to that student's record. So that's what we've done, and it's worked out okay. I mean, it would be nice, I guess, to have, like you said, an Excel spreadsheet. We could do a filter, but we're a pretty big school that has a lot of errors, and it's worked out okay for us. So I don't know as far as where you all are with your IT needs. It works for us.
Well, and that's where the idea was to keep what's being done now, because a lot of people want to keep doing it the way they always have, but to make another more flexible mechanism as well if you want to do it a different way. So that was kind of where that was left. Anything else? Okay. Discussion and possible consideration of how or if to synchronize the federal and state net price calculators. Lynn, I didn't have you down for that. Great.
Unless you want to do this, Jay? No?
I can very easily add your name. So.
Okay. I don't think this will take very long, but It's my fault that we're discussing this because I made a suggestion for us to make a change to the way that we currently collect information for the net price calculator, the state's net price calculator. And Dan suggested that we bring it up to the Financial Aid Advisory Committee and let you discuss it and give us advice on how you would like for us to proceed. Currently, as you know, we have the state's net price calculator, and when it was developed and implemented back in 2009, 2010, we tried to make it comply not only with the state requirements for a state net price calculator, but also with the federal requirements so that institutions required to participate would only have to have one link to a net price calculator on your website instead of having to do one for state and one for federal. So the way we're currently processing the information in the state's net price calculator is that in February, March, I go in and I update or I do some testing and implementing of the changes to the federal methodology so that when students go into the net price calculator and answer the questions that are in there, it will calculate an estimated EFC based on the upcoming year's federal methodology calculation. You are required to submit your college student budget system information to the CSB by April the 1st for the upcoming year. Around April the 15th, we then flip the switch and we activate the new federal methodology parameters that we've tested for the EFC calculation, and we implement or we upload the CSB information that you have reported for your cost of attendance figures so that it's all matching the years that are supposed to match. According to federal regulations, they're supposed to, whatever EFC calculation you use, you're supposed to use the same cost of attendance information and then the same award information. So when we do that, we then ask institutions to upload your award information, your estimated award information for the upcoming year. The reason, from what I understand from Dan, when this was implemented, that we decided to use estimated year information was it was from feedback from the financial aid community that you wanted to have the most current information available for students. So the most current cost of attendance, the most current EFC calculation, and then the most current estimated award information. Problem is that when I attended the NASFA conference this last summer, I attended Jessica Finkel's presentation from the Department of Education, and she specifically, I have her presentation here, specifically said that the cost of attendance and grant aid data have to be from the same year, which we're doing. You know, it's all from the same year, and represent actual, not projected data. So I raised my hand, as I have a bad habit of doing, and asked, just for clarification. And she said it definitely cannot be estimated year information to meet the federal requirements. It needs to be actual information from a complete year. So I talked to Dan and to Jane about possibly changing that in our net price calculator, because we do say for those institutions that are participating that if you participate in the state's net price calculator, you're not only meeting state requirements, you're meeting federal requirements. So I just am concerned that maybe we're not quite there and that we might ought to change to looking at prior year cost of attendance, which we will still have in the college student budget system, which would also make it that you would have to then upload actual data from your systems instead of estimating for the various EFC ranges. I don't know if you're familiar with the net price calculator and how you have to upload that information, because you may not be the ones doing that in your office. But there are EFC ranges, and you estimate the grant aid, the scholarship aid. We go one step further and ask for loan and work study, which was another thing Jessica brought up, that the federal definition of net price is cost of attendance minus EFC minus gift aid. And in our calculator, we actually have two net price figures. We do the estimated net price with just the gift aid, and then we go one step further. If you've reported self-help aid, we do a net price including self-help aid as well. I asked the question, is that okay, since we provide both what your definition is with just gift aid, but we go a step further? And she said, that's really not the federal definition. If I were doing it, I wouldn't do it that way. So I think probably it's okay because we're providing both, and we're providing what they consider the definition of net price to be. So I think that's probably okay. I'm comfortable with that part, but I'm just a little uncomfortable with the actual year versus estimated year. There are some positives and negatives to making the change. If we did start looking at actual prior year, we could do it a little bit earlier. Right now, we have to wait until the CSB information is in, and I've made the federal methodology changes, et cetera, which is, like I said, around April the 15th. If we started using actual prior year, we could do it back in the fall, but y'all are really busy in the fall, so I don't know. Well, you're busy in the spring. You're busy all the time, so I don't know. We could do it earlier, as early as, end of summer, probably? A negative thing about it is that if you use actual information, and we have this issue with some, with institutions who actually started doing actual information, is that if they're a smaller institution, there are some EFC ranges that don't have any data in them. So if you have a student that goes into the public site and their EFC, when they answer all the questions, happens to be in that EFC range, they're not getting any financial aid information back for that institution. They're just getting cost with no financial aid, and that's their net price. So,
question?
Dan, did you want to say something first? Okay, Marcus?
Can that data be extracted from the database?
From the I don't know.
The EFCs there, you've defined the different categories already. We're having to supply that information.
That's a very good point.
And we're talking about, so it'd be the average, I'm not that familiar with NPC, so it's asking for gift aid.
It's looking at within different EFC ranges for the average gift aid, average scholarship grant aid for students within that EFC range at that institution, if you're looking at actual data.
So we would not be reflecting a Texas grant average. It would be the average for
all
students
types.
In that group, federal, state, institutional.
Yes. That's a very good point.
It's
actually kind of intriguing.
I know schools really enjoy providing that information.
I know. I know.
And you'd have to work with them to on that. Yeah.
Well, if we're using prior year data, the FADS is already prior by 1 year. And so in a given year, we have this year completed FADS in
You would
February.
just wait until this time. We'd still be the same. You wouldn't be able to do it any earlier.
Right. And
like
we have had
you would
years,
if y'all submitted the information. We would have to do it when the financial aid database information is complete and submitted. Then, yeah.
If we had a year like last year, where there were some institutions with serious issues that didn't get resolved until summer, what do we do in that case? Do we use prior year data for those institutions at that time?
No, because you have to use according to Jessica. You have to the years have to match up in your data elements in the calculator. So you'd have to.
So we'd have to have those institutions submit it separately as opposed to pulling it from FADS.
Possibly.
There's incentive then to get the FADS taken care of quickly. Not that there's not other incentives provided.
I guess my biggest issue was the providing 2-year-old information to students that might actually go to the net price calculator expecting it to be telling them what might happen in the fall which is if I was going to go to a net price calculator, I would want to go there thinking about how it might help me as opposed to what happened 2 years ago. So I had, and the reason I brought it up, I think we're doing it within the state, we're doing it well, and we're helping our students to be literally compliant from a federal standpoint. I think we're not helping our students, and I understand perhaps why they're doing it on a national basis to make sure nobody's doing shenanigans on their reporting. But I don't. And the reason I wanted to bring it up to this group is I would very much like to continue doing it the way we're currently doing it. But I think there is some discomfort now, the fact that potentially we could be in a non-compliant position, which wouldn't be good for any of us. So I'm open to having the discussion. Ultimately, it's going to be, do we want to go back in time and provide 2-year-old information to our students? And if everybody's fine with that, then I would be fine with that. I didn't want to go there because from a consensus standpoint, I disagreed with that.
And it would still be prior year information when we do it, but what he's saying is when the student who's looking at the net price calculators and incoming freshman for the upcoming year, the data that will be in there, even though it's prior year to us, will be 2 years prior for them.
It's the coming college student budgets or next year's budgets. They're actual. They're submitted by the institutions.
Right.
The financial aid practice would be, this is what we're going to be doing next year.
Right.
So, but if we go to what they're saying, it's I'm going to be providing fiscal year 13 data for fiscal year 15.
Right.
So my cost of attendance are going to be off. Everything's going to be off.
Is there any way of identifying, going back a couple of years, comparing to the 13 data, have there been significant changes? And possibly during that time frame there was. I think schools were looking at some tuition guarantees and some things like that. So really targeting different populations. But those efforts have now been in place for 3 or 4 years or so. So I don't know that the data is going to be skewed that much. But I'd be curious, is there a significant difference in that prior versus just prior? Again, I have no clue.
Well, we're going to put Deanna on the hot seat because I know UTSA is relooking at their packaging philosophies for their student population because they have certain, they're trying to recruit certain types of students and they're trying to focus their financial aid in various, EFC ranges. So they would be one of the institutions I would say, yeah, they made a pretty substantial change from what they did even last year to what they're going to be doing next year. I guess I'm kind of stuck on, FADs aside, we don't always get FAD certified until January, February, so I don't know if it's going to be much more timely. But we are we're going to be to be compliant, we're going to be 2 years late, and the intention of the net price calculator is not to give students old information unless we're happy with that.
Dan, does the state's NPC calculator statute address this at all? Does it say?
No.
Okay. All right. So, okay, good.
Do you know what the College Board and some of the other products look like that do the net price calculator? The ones that institutions can pay for?
I haven't gone out and looked at them.
I haven't
Some
either.
of you may have.
Does anybody pay to have that, or everybody
We
uses
do.
the states?
No, we pay.
Who do you use?
Hardwick Day.
Do you know what theirs?
I mean, listening to Lynn, and she had already mentioned this to me. I mean, I think, we use data from the year that's finished. I mean, so we're building
immediately finished, right?
Yeah. So we're building our net price calculator right now for the fall, and the students who have applied to TCU can go in and look at it right now, and they can see our budgets for the fall, which are set, our awarding philosophy, which is set, and then of course the federal methodology's been, put in there, as well as our institutional methodology. So I mean, so I can testify that that's how that one, works. It's pretty customized for us, but
And sounds pretty non-compliant with the federal because you're using next year's budgets with last year's.
It's way too
Yeah.
good data.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I mean, because
Let me
as you said,
reemphasize that
the
for
most.
everybody that's-
Oh, shut up, Dan. The most. I mean, because as you said, I agree with you, Dan. I think 2 years old data is pretty useless. I think it's pretty misleading. Actually, is the word I would use. And that's not to say it would be intentionally that way, but I think, whatever we have to do to get that as close to right as possible, is what we need to do. But again, we don't use the state calculator. So
Private institutions, $30 an hour is not an unusual amount to tweak your tuition by.
Oh, no.
So you think when you use 1-year-old data, you're already going to be off $900 on a 30-hour budget. So you're using 2-year-old data, you're going to be off a couple of $1,000s.
yeah, it's significant.
Without a institutional change in your packaging philosophy, just business as usual.
What does it do to you if you end up having to do one thing for the federal government and one thing for us? And a different thing for us?
Another thing for your institution, because you're doing almost live data, but you're still have to comply with what the feds are saying, supposedly, still complying with what the state's doing, but then also doing what's best for your population. So in some ways you're doing, or could be doing, up to 3.
Why not have the state one do both? Here's the actual data based on this particular year as reported, compliance with the federal government, and here's what the university is now saying is their projected. Put both side by side.
That sounds like a great idea. I agree with that.
I second that.
Currently, I don't know if you've ever gone out to look at ours. You have the capability of comparing up to 3 institutions, which is, I think, really cool. So I don't know how, format-wise, how that would.
Let the student pick. I want projected data, I want actual data.
And say that the actual data is what meets the federal requirement. I mean, put that information in there too. But if you're looking for maybe more current or something like that, lead them to the answer that they're trying to find.
What I get for asking.
Well, I think the more important thing, in some respects, is because the coordinating board and the state, in some respects, has positioned this as this. If you're using
federally
this and reporting to
compliant.
us, you're federally compliant.
Exactly.
So I think the coordinating board needs to be federally compliant. Beyond that, whether or not you use the proposed packaging philosophy, or whether an institution now has an obligation, if they want to present that, to use their own net price calculator to do that. I think it's more important that the coordinating board be compliant with the federal.
Aren't you glad you asked?
That's what I was just saying, that, be careful what you ask a question.
The coordinating board obligation in statute is to do the state one, and we had hoped we could do it, both the federal and the state, meet both the needs both of the state and federal with that one approach. So if we continue to maintain ours as the state NPC and they have to do a federal NPC that is less accurate, is it better for us to make the school submit both to us, or simply have them submit the one that we have been collecting? Do we need to be the depository of both versions, or can we tell the schools ours is not federal compliant and you will have to do that?
No. Again, when we did ours, the feds didn't really have a guidance on using prior year data. I mean, this was new to them as well. So we have a lot of letters and emails back and forth seeking their concurrence that, yes, this is compliant. And we got essentially one letter that says, yes, you're compliant, but it was more targeted around providing the link that wasn't hosted at your institution's web. It was hosted by the coordinating board. They said, yes, that's fine.
Well, not that you didn't have to house the net price calculator on your system. You could just provide a link to
And
a
that
state-supported one.
made you compliant.
Yes.
And what helps right now is that we're not having to pay for that service.
Yes.
So I would say, that I would want for y'all to be federal compliant. If not, then we're going to incur another cost, to be federally compliant.
Well, I guess we could easily, and I say easily, that we could, it's easy to go backwards and pick up information because we would already have all that information. So I think that's kind of a slam dunk. To Joe's point, while it sounds easy to put a switch on the front end and say we can give you last year's or you can look at next year's, that sounds easy to do. Given the programming that went into the net price calculator, I don't know how easy that would be because it was built by
a contractor and in a language that our programmers are not that familiar with.
Dothraki. No, I'm sorry. The reason we brought this up was to get y'all's feedback on what the committee felt like we ought to do. So I think we've gotten feedback from the committee on what we ought to do. Marcus, do you want to recapture the fact that we want to be literally, figuratively, federally compliant first and foremost, and take care of our students secondarily?
I'm not going to vote for that one.
I think it would be best if that question were rephrased. I think it's good to be federally compliant, having just dealt with some auditors. I think it's in everyone's best interest to provide the most accurate information to our students, that we possibly can. Can that be done in the same way? It does not appear so. I think the more information that you can make available to them, I think that's good too. But there's so much confusion out there. Making it as simple as possible is always a good approach as well.
Yeah, I worry that it's going to be more confusing. It's not going to be simpler for the students. They're going to look at Ron's institution. They're going to go to the net price calculator at the court if you happen to use it, and it's going to be old. And they're going to say, "Hey, wait a minute, I want that deal." And Ron said, "Well, that deal was 2 years ago. That's not this deal."
And then it also
we're misleading the students by being literally federally compliant.
But we're still not going to have apples and apples because she's doing too good of a job, and the rest of us aren't able to keep up with it.
But I'll be in prison, so.
Because she's not federally compliant. Okay.
I think in our world, if Millette were using the coordinating board's tool, it would be reflective of what she's doing.
Yeah. Lynn, can you read that one more time? And I'll go get it.
Off of the PowerPoint?
About the estimate or projection or whatever she said there.
It says COA and grant aid data are from the same year and represent actual, not projected data.
Because I might, and maybe there's something else on this slide that speaks to that, but I might object to the idea that just because it hasn't already happened doesn't mean I'm guessing. Okay, so I know exactly
your packaging philosophies for those.
I know exactly what that student's
right.
going to get, we could change it. So could all of us. But we're done with. We know all of those figures. We know the cost. We know the federal methodology, and we know our awards. So
I understand.
I guess I would take issue with the term actual data. That is actual data. So, and you said something earlier about a year that's been completed. So I think that's obviously puts a different
somewhere
spin
else. On it. That may have been what her response was to me, but yeah.
And does the U.S. Department of Ed have a net price calculator?
Yes, ED will release updated versions of the template annually in January.
And is that what they're doing? Have we looked at that template?
I do not know. The other thing that concerns me, if you do go to actual data, do we worry with those EFC ranges for some institutions with zero data? that student is not being served because they're not, just because there was no student at that institution with within that EFC range the prior year, that student's going to think, well, I'm not eligible for financial aid at that institution.
I don't know if you need to be worried about it, but if I was an institution, I'd be worried about it.
It can be considerable.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, and in the ones that I've seen when institutions have done it that way, and I'll go out and look and I'll get back in touch with them and say,
this is why.
This is
Can a disclaimer pop up saying because of small populations, we have no students in this
There
category?
is currently a way that institutions can add information. I don't remember what we call it. Comment, yeah.
Okay.
I guess we could somehow look at all of those and go in and add a comment in their institutional.
Just basically saying, add a little bit to the EFC or subtract a little bit to find the next closest range. And that would hopefully get them some data as to where they might fall.
Possible.
It's not probable, however.
That'll never happen.
More thoughts, comments? Did I successfully avoid your question?
Well, no, I think kind of back to Millette's point, the issue that we've had internally is we have that exact same argument, and this, how do you interpret all these, because when you put it on a PowerPoint slide, it's very clear. When you get into the guts of it, it's not so clear. Ultimately, when auditors show up and say, show me your net price calculator, show me, you say I've used the states, I don't know where they're going to go with that, or even if they would go there, I doubt that they would even look at it.
But
Good.
but they could.
So I always wanted to argue that what we were doing was correct, and it was in the student's best interest, and we could defend that position, and the auditors would say, all right, we'll give you that. I don't know.
But I don't think we're the ones that are going to be defending that. It's the institutions that are going to be defending that. So
I guess there's, we can go back and, the ease of putting a switch in the front of, we can give you information either from 2 years ago or for next year, which one do you want to do? So we have a literal compliant net price calculator if they wanted to use it. And it would be pulling the same information that we really already have. So I don't know there would be any more work on any institution's part. Or I don't know how we would display both concurrently. That's a problem. But I could see that setting up a switch or having two independent sites that you could go to. Do you want last year's or do you want next year's? Yes or no, and then you go to that site that gives you that information. So we would have two sites running. And I'm not an IT person. Joe can answer that.
More thoughts, comments? Okay, do we have any unfinished business from last meeting we need to discuss?
I need to go through action items.
Okay.
When you're ready for
Let's
this
do,
meeting.
Jane has the action items from last time.
I believe I've captured them. If not, let me know. Regarding our minutes, the suggestion was to move to a bullet type format as opposed to the full transcription. With regard to exemptions and waivers, to survey institutions about whom to contact, whom we should direct students to with regard to questions about exemptions and waivers. With regard to the question about the 150 hours for Texas grant, we want to get a legal opinion on the ability or the interpretation of that statute as to being 150 hours taken, some of which may or may not have been Texas grant hours, or whether those are hours paid for with Texas grant. With regard to our rules and the posting of rules, there was a request that we send out the notices of posting with a little note at the top as to where to go to see the information in the register. Regarding the FADs and the 001, we need to take a look and confirm about the students who are identified as affidavit in the 001 but not in FADs. If they can tell, I don't know how they would ever tell that they were in FADs or should be in FADs, but we need to take a look at that. And what is the report that the institutions use for reporting non-001 students if they want to expand and report all of their students? With regard to NPC, I don't think we reached a conclusion, so I don't know if there's, I guess maybe look at the option of adding a second option on our website so that the student can toggle between one or the other, and look into the possibility of that. And then the only other action item that I would think is to set a date for the next meeting if possible. Did I miss anything? No?
Okay. When do we typically have what month? February?
It would be May. It's every 3 months, so it would be May. Now the fourth meeting would fall into August, and that has been voted against heartily in the past because of what's going on. So if that one's going to be in September, you could probably have the next meeting in May or June, whichever is better for the group.
I think by denying folks breaks and lunch really limits our conversation, our dialogue. So maybe we want to continue to do that. Does everybody have their May calendars available? Would you prefer to kind of send out a few dates and let everybody kind of choose from? Is that easier? Let's do that. That works better for me.
I think that we should use Doodle. Risa, what is it? Doodle. You can send out a list of dates and people can click on the box, and it's very cool. And it's not survey.
Reese is a master of that, so she's our doodler.
I just resigned from that task, so anyone else who wants to do it is fine with me.
So do you have to have a Doodle subscription? It's free. Free doodling.
Good heavens.
Along with those dates, we'll send out requests for topics that maybe need discussion in addition to some of the things that we've kind of left pending.
Marcus, I'd like to thank our sit-in members today. I thought they did more than an admirable job sitting in for their
I agree.
colleagues, so much so that I think that perhaps we should contemplate looking at
Harold, we did enjoy him in meetings past, and we'll miss him. Same way with Lisa. So thank you, everyone. Excellent meeting. It really did go quite fast, but there was a lot of meat that was thrown out there for us to chew on, too. Since we're approaching lunchtime, let's keep it going that way. So hearing nothing else, motion?
Adjourn.
Let's go. It was
Travel home
unanimous, by the way.
safely, everybody. Thanks
Thank
for
you.
coming.
Marcus, are you looking?